The most valuable clue Earhart gave before she disappeared.
If she did what she said she was doing, she should have made it to another island.
Amelia Earhart.
On July 2nd, 1937, the skies of the world were shocked when legendary pilot Amelia Earhart and her navigator Fred Noonan disappeared somewhere over the Pacific.
When she decided in 1937 that she was going to fly around the world, which was an ambitious thing to do in 1937, the world watched with bated breath. This was exciting.
Their drive took them over 22,000 miles, from California to Lae, New Guinea, through South America, Africa, and Asia. But things got worse. The radio signals got weaker. Warnings about running out of fuel were sent, and then there was nothing. What happened next is one of the biggest mysteries in the history of flying.
I hope to accomplish something really scientifically worthwhile for aviation.
There was no debris, no certified sighting, and no answer. What really happened to Amelia Earhart's plane, and where did it go down? Foundation. Amelia Earhart was at the height of her celebrity in the summer of 1937. She was an aviation pioneer and a symbol of bravery. She had already set records, inspired millions, and shown that limits could be pushed. She came up with a crazy plan, a 29,000-mile trip around the world, as close to the equator as possible, with her navigator, Fred Noonan, by her side. After leaving Oakland, California, on June 1st, Amelia and Fred flew more than 22,000 miles to Lae, New Guinea on June 29th, stopping in South America, Africa, India, Southeast Asia, and other remote destinations along the way. Maps and imaginations made their following step stand out in a big way. They were supposed to fly across ocean for more than 2,500 miles to Howland Island, a small coral atoll in the Central Pacific. This tiny island, which was barely a dot, was supposed to be a place to refuel, rest, and get directions for the most perilous and fragile section of the trip. The Lockheed Model 10E Electra, which Amelia and Fred were on, took off from Lae's runway at daybreak on July 2nd, 1937. They left with a full tank of gas and went east toward Howland in the weak light of a misty daybreak. But things were not perfect at all. The weather forecasts weren't very reliable, and there were expected to be cloudy skies. The navigation aids were still primitive. The long-range radio, celestial navigation, and compass bearings were all hard to use since there were so few reference points and the ocean was so big. As they got closer to the end, they worked with the U.S. The Coast Guard cutter Itasca, which was close Howland, was supposed to help them. The ship was supposed to help by sending signals over the radio and even making smoke from its boilers to give visual clues. But as the hours went by, the radio signals got worse. Amelia is said to have called in to say she was low on gas. She also indicated she wasn't sure where she was going. One of her last messages was, "We are running north and south," which showed that she didn't know where she was. Around 8:43 a.m. Howland time, Amelia sent what is thought to be her last confirmed radio message to Itasca. She said in that message that she thought she was on top of the ship but couldn't see anything. She also said again that her fuel was running very low. Then she stopped talking. There was no landfall. There's no visual proof of Howland. There was no sign of Amelia in the sky. After that, the world waited and looked, but nothing really happened. Amelia and Fred never made it to their refueling stop on Howland Island, and they disappeared in the huge Pacific Ocean. Early clues and hidden secrets. The U.S. immediately started looking for Amelia when she went missing without a trace. Navy and Coast Guard ships went back and forth across huge parts of the ocean looking for her, but they didn't find any signals, flares, or wreckage. People have been trying to figure out what happened to Amelia Earhart and Fred Noonan for years, and the mystery has only expanded over the years. Over time, the U.S., the Navy, and Coast Guard found numerous pieces of evidence that led them to the initial and most widely accepted theory. the open ocean accident. The crash and sink hypothesis is another name for this. This idea says that Amelia's Electra ran out of gas during or right after the last part of the trip to Howland Island. She must not have been able to find the island in time and didn't have a good place to land in an emergency. So, she had to throw the plane into the ocean. The Electra had to sink once it hit the water because it was a land plane and wasn't made to land in water. It was almost impossible to find in the vast, far-off ocean. A long time ago, the U.S. government, aviation historians, and a lot of other scholars all agreed with this position. Putting together the early signs and what we already know, such as her last radio messages about running low on petrol, fuel capacity, navigational problems, and the fact that there was no confirmed touchdown or recognized wreck on land. But the Pacific is very big, and scientists have used several ways to try to figure out where the jet might have crashed. Experts have looked at how much fuel Amelia's plane had, how much may have been consumed up until the last transmissions, how much was likely remained, and how far the jet could have gone after its last known location. The radio signal strength and logs from the Electra are other early clues. You can tell how distant Amelia was from Howland by looking at the strength, quality, and timeliness of her radio messages to the Itasca ship. Researchers have also utilized Monte Carlo models to simulate millions of possible flight paths and take into account things like wind drift, navigation errors, and fuel use to find out what happened to Amelia Earhart's plane and where it landed. Experts suggest that Amelia's plane may have crashed around Howland Island based on all the information. Some people say it is about 6,000 square miles of ocean floor. Some people claim it's southeast of Howland and east of Baker Island. This fits with the theory that she may have gone off course because of a navigational error or drift. There were a lot of speculations and guesses about where Amelia's plane crashed, but not much was actually found. Scientists started to think more about radio signals, distress calls, and communications that might have come from the Electra in the days right after her final known contact. Many analysts and professionals were astonished by these early indicators since they implied that she might not have fallen right away, but instead stayed alive. After Amelia's plane went down, experts found roughly 120 radio transmissions sent after the incident between July 2nd and July 18th, 1937. Based on the frequency and time, 57 of these were thought to have come from her plane. There were several types of signals. Some had Morse code or dashes and jumbled speech, and many said they heard Amelia's voice in trouble. Others had signals in Morse code that were often faint or garbled. The Coast Guard cutter Itasca had one of her last confirmed radio messages, which said, "We are on the line 157/337. That means Amelia thought she was on a nautical line that would cut across Howland Island and other islands to the south. Some reliable signals were picked up at night or in the early morning, which can help us figure out the state of the reef and the tides. People on ships, islands, and private residents with shortwave radios also said they heard distress calls with terms like "water's high" and "we can't hold on much longer," which suggested that her plane was inundated before it sank. Some scholars think that the open ocean crash explanation isn't complete because of these transmissions and early indicators. This brings us to the idea of a forced landing or emergency landing. They think she landed not far from where she was supposed to, and that her plane stayed in good enough shape to use the radio for a while. One of the places she might have landed is Gardner Island, which is today known as Nikumaroro in the Phoenix Islands. If Amelia didn't see Howland Island and her navigational line carried her a little off track, the hypothesis argues she may have followed the line 157/337 until she reached to Nikumaroro. She may have landed on that coral atoll reef, at least in part, with her plane sitting on wheels or a flat reef. That might have let the radio work, which would explain those radio broadcasts The repeated signals, broadcasts, and calls that different people got for several days after the plane went missing may be simply explained by the forced landing theory. This is because it wouldn't have happened if the plane had gone to the bottom of the deep ocean. These signals could also have happened while the tide or water level was low enough that they didn't immediately harm her plane's engine. This is especially likely, considering there were emergency calls about the water levels getting too high. In this case, Amelia and Fred might have lived for a while, probably on an uninhabited reef, sending out distress signals and waited for help that never came, with no ships or planes flying by and seeing them. But it's hard for everyone to believe this notion because no one has located any definite wreckage or people on Nikumaroro. They all got washed away by high tides and are still sinking to the bottom of the ocean. For a long time, nothing was found on Nikumaroro. But throughout the years, terrible discoveries have been revealed on other Pacific islands, leading to new ideas about where the plane landed and what happened to her after that. The shocking discoveries. Over the years, investigators have found things they didn't expect to find, such bone fragments, personal items, metal scraps, and human remains. All of these artifacts seem to help solve the riddle of what happened to Amelia Earhart's plane and where it crashed. But they also make things more confusing. One of the astonishing discoveries that supports the forced landing theory happened in 1900 on the secluded atoll of Nikumaroro. A British colonial officer found 13 human bones close to what looked like a tiny campfire. Dr. D.W. Hoodless looked at the bones after they were sent to Fiji. He said they were from a short, stocky European male. But after many years, new evidence brought the case back to life. Richard Jantz, a forensic anthropologist, looked over Amelia's body and compared it to measures from the past, such as the size of her skull and the lengths of her humerus, radius, and tibia. What he found was astounding. These numbers were actually more like what you would anticipate from a tall European woman. It looks like those bones might have belonged to Amelia, though. This astonishing find showed the world what really happened to Amelia Earhart's plane and where it landed. They also find various things near the bones, like a woman's shoe sole, a sextant box, a Benedictine bottle, and other things that Amelia would have brought with her while she flew across the world. Even though these finds point to anything, the bones were found too long ago and are now gone. Old pictures, measurements, reports, and descriptions of artifacts are all that is left. So, you can't do DNA tests on the original bones or things from so long ago and link them to Amelia. There have been stories of metal bits, objects, and remnants that appear like they were from Amelia's Electra, in addition to bones. These facts support the idea that she was really on Nikumaroro when the plane crashed and didn't just land on water and drop to the bottom of the Pacific. Researchers identified a piece of aluminum that is the same type and thickness as the pieces that were used in Amelia's plane. In 2014, scientists looked at the metal waste again and found something else that was shocking. It looked like a patch that was seen in older images of the Electra, notably where a window had been fixed before her last flight. There were other things found, such cosmetic bottles, containers, and things that Amelia used to have. One of these was a bottle of freckle concealer from the 1930s that looked like one she had used on recent trips. A lot of these artifacts were quite old and damaged by the elements, and some of them were even broken. That made some people think they might belong to other persons, other planes, or just be junk that fell from the sky. But when you look at the location, chronology, and coincidences, it looks like Amelia might have landed on Nikumaroro or somewhere close by. There has been fresh technological study that questions how distant Amelia was from Howland Island when she last sent messages, even though there is a lot of evidence to support this. In 2025, Nauticos, a firm that studies deep-sea history and exploration, made a big announcement. They said that the new information they got from putting together Amelia's radio system shows where her plane would have been on July 2nd, 1937. This could help find the exact place where the plane crashed. Experts have also used satellite images and anomaly detection to find a visible feature on Nikomororo named the Taria object. The size and substance of this aberration are similar to that of Amelia's Electra. It is close to the island's northwestern reef flat, which is where some of her emergency transmissions may have come from. Storms or moving sediments could have shattered the plane into pieces, which is why it can't be located, along with Amelia and Fred's full remains. But all of these new theories about signals and images make us doubt some of the old ones. One idea is that Amelia was over the open deep ocean when she last sent a message, and that there were no geographical features nearby that she might have utilized to land. People are horrified by these fresh finds because they give rise to new ideas about what might have happened to Amelia Earhart's plane and where it might have landed. Some people think these notions are true, like Amelia being stuck on the island and not being rescued. Others think of darker and crazier concepts, such as the Japanese kidnapping the famed pilot. The dark side. There are more well-known hypotheses about Amelia Earhart's voyage, such as the crash at sea, radio distress calls, and distant landings. But there are also darker rumors that her flight was not merely an ambitious aviation achievement to sail around the world. It was actually part of a secret intelligence operation, and Amelia was more than just a pilot. She was also a spy. The Japanese kidnap and spy mission concept is one of the main variants of this dark thread. Because of this, Amelia and her navigator Fred were not just flying across the world, but it was a secret mission to spy on Japanese-controlled islands, such as taking pictures of Japanese bases or tracking army movements. So, instead of crashing into the water when she couldn't find Howland Island, Amelia flew toward the Marshall Islands. Japanese forces then arrested her and either killed her or put her in jail. The retired U.S. was one of the key people who believed in this thesis, Colonel Rollin C. Reineck of the Air Force. He created a book called Amelia Earhart Survived, in which he said that Amelia couldn't find Howland and instead went north to the Marshalls, where Japanese troops were already fighting. The argument argues that her rescue or capture was kept quiet to avoid any political problems, especially as the two countries were getting more tense in the late 1930s. This leads us to the idea of government cover-ups, which is where the theory gets even more complicated. Many rumors of a cover-up started to spread soon after Amelia went missing. In October 1937, an Australian newspaper called Smith's Weekly made one of the first accusations. It said that the Navy was using the disappearance as a reason to fly over Japanese land that they thought was breaking League of Nations rules. The publication said it was a probe, and that they were using the hunt for the missing plane as an excuse to spy from the air. Another portion of the hypothesis says that there exist pictures and eyewitness testimonies, but they have been hidden, ignored, or given the wrong date. A History Channel documentary from 2017 said that they found a picture from the Office of Naval Intelligence that showed Amelia and Fred alive after they went missing in 1937. The picture was taken on a barge in the Marshall Islands. This suggested something shocking. The U.S. administration either knew or chose to think that she was in Japanese captivity, but kept that information a secret. But it turned out the photo was taken before the flight. It was in a Japanese photo album that was out in 1935. Still, this doesn't prove that she wasn't taken. This is especially true because eyewitness tales, local legends, and oral histories all helped people believe that Amelia and Red were seen following their flight. Some people who live in the Marshall Islands say they witnessed a plane crash near an atoll, while others say they saw Japanese troops take two foreign flyers. Some islanders even said they saw Amelia alive but in jail on Saipan after World War II. Frederick Gerner published these stories in 1966. One of them, from Saipan, said that Japanese forces had killed Amelia. These stories are pretty dramatic, yet the proof is not clear. The idea that the Japanese kidnapped Amelia is quite interesting, especially to the media, but there are a lot of flaws with this notion, the biggest of which is that there is no proof. There is no documented U.S. document that claims Amelia is a spy or that the U.S. knew Japan had taken her. A lot of the so-called proof also looks like it was misdated, misconstrued, or doesn't prove anything. One of these is the picture that said it showed Amelia after the flight, although it was later revealed to have been released years before the flight. Even the testimonials are secondhand, delivered many years later, and the details don't always match up. There are also lookalikes, which makes it impossible to accept that they were seen after the incident. We also can't overlook the fact that her last messages showed that her plane was low on fuel. Her jet couldn't have gone around or missed Howland, flown much off course, reached Japanese-held land, and stayed undamaged or mostly intact, while avoiding discovery with such little fuel. Even with all of this, the stories of spies and cover-ups keep coming back. The Pacific was already a place where tensions were rising between the U.S. and Japan in 1937. During this time, there was spying, gathering information, and watching people. Also, Amelia was famous, charming, and brave. Thus, it seems more likely that she went missing because of secret missions, government lies, and heroic bravery than because her plane crashed and she was lost at sea. There are still a lot of questions because no confirmed wreckage has been recovered. No remains have been authenticated, and the radio logs are incomplete. A number of wild hypotheses have come out of this, including the idea that Amelia is living under a new name, the strange or bizarre side. Some of the strangest ideas about what happened to Amelia Earhart still haven't gone away after almost 100 years. People are still attempting to figure out what happened to Amelia Earhart's plane and where it landed. These concepts are still around in gossip, novels, movies, and local stories. Some people say she was held by foreign powers, some say she lived under a false name, and yet others say they saw her alive in places where she shouldn't have been. One of the most famous weird notions is that Amelia lived the rest of her life under a different name after she went missing. Some people even think she was Irene Bolam, a New Jersey housewife who passed away in 1982. Irene Bolam and Amelia have a lot of physical traits in common. Irene also had some connections to aviation, but she normally stayed away from other people. But when the problem was at its worst, Irene Bolam had to come out and say she wasn't Amelia Earhart. She even sued the people who published Amelia Earhart Lives for defamation, and the book was taken off the shelves. Some people claim that the two women are just identical on the surface. As we've talked about before, some people have said they saw Amelia alive over the years. Some people reported they saw her being taken by ship to Japan or to atolls. Some people said they saw Japanese soldiers taking her away. Some people have also said that they saw them in Saipan or Tokyo. But it's hard to believe these unusual and bizarre beliefs because there isn't enough proof. There is no clear evidence that these people truly saw Amelia in person, and many of the images and stories that are believed to be true can't be checked. The Irene Bolam idea fell apart when she swore she didn't do it and then sued them for what they said. These bizarre notions are interesting, but there isn't any solid historical, physical, or forensic evidence to back them up. The radio logs, last confirmed communications, fuel usage, and geography are all pieces of data that support the crash or remote landing argument and the forced landing theory. But for years, people who look into things and people who watch have been preoccupied with finding out what happened to Amelia Earhart's plane and where it fell. Investigators become obsessed. The disappearance of Amelia Earhart was more than just another aviation disaster from the start. It turned into an obsession, like a riddle that thousands of people are trying to solve. In the last few decades, amateur detectives, historians, radio operators, and treasure hunters have put a lot of time, money, and equipment into chasing every ray of hope. Many times, the boundary between meticulous inquiry and obsession has become less clear, and even now, scientists are still digging deep. One evident indicator of obsession is that thousands of people have searched through radio logs and supposed post-loss broadcasts throughout the years. The International Group of Historic Aircraft Recovery and other groups have put together lists of hundreds of reports, up to 200, of weak radio signals that might have come after Amelia's last confirmed communications. These researchers have even tried to make minute-by-minute recreations of reported signals, keeping account of not only what was reported, but also who reported it, when, and from where. Some of these transmissions are very weak, garbled, or include static or interference from the atmosphere. Still, a lot of researchers are really interested in them. People have wanted to analyze every whisper, hint, and crackling voice via shortwave, even though there's no way to know for sure if it was Amelia's craft. The first U.S. military response in 1937 set records right away. There were many ships, dozens of planes, and thousands of people looking for something in thousands of square miles of ocean. But over the years, private scholars, nonprofits, citizen explorers, and amateur historians have all gone on different trips to distant Pacific islands, ocean floors, and reefs with just small clues. But the more they look into this riddle, the more they get it wrong. There have been several tests on every piece of aluminum, shoe, bottle, and bottle fragment, as well as claims of bones, but there is still no solid confirmation that any of these things are connected to Amelia's plane crash. Many people have seen patterns that aren't even there because they are so obsessed. People want the mystery so much that they keep looking into even the weakest evidence, as shown by all the rumors, even the ones that turned out to be untrue or misdated. Some people have even accused Irene Bolam of being Amelia, which shows how obsessed she is. They made her make an oath and sue other people. But no matter how many hypotheses, investigations, and obsessions there are, no one can agree on what really happened to Amelia Earhart's plane or where it crashed. The final revelation. There is no definitive proof that Amelia Earhart's fate is sealed, but the most recent discoveries have made one strong possibility more likely. She may have crash-landed on a desolate island, perhaps Nikomaroro, and lived for a while before dying from exposure. The satellite pictures, the Taraya object anomaly, the radio signals coming together around that atoll, and the things like the freckle cream bottles and shoe pieces all point to the fact that the official open ocean crash hypothesis might not be the whole story. But we shouldn't forget that the Pacific is huge, with shifting sands and lost bones that warn us that certain truths may never be known. Historians, pilots, and conspiracy theorists still disagree on what happened to her. Do you think Amelia's plane went down in the ocean, or did she get lost on land? And which theory do you think is the most believable? Please leave a comment to let us know what you think. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click on the following video that comes up on your screen. You will like it.